Hello, listeners. We're excited to welcome a very special guest to our show, Chef Steph Baryluk, an Indigenous Red Seal chef, educator, and powerful voice in Canada's food landscape. Chef Steph brings over a decade of culinary expertise, blending classical training with deep cultural roots shaped by her Arctic upbringing. Recognized as one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women, Steph is helping to redefine how we think about food systems, sustainability, and cultural connection. Laura and I have both met Steph at different occasions through Sid Mehta, who has been also a guest on our podcast, episode 6, I believe. Yes,
Yep.
and Laura, where did you both meet?
Well, again, through Sid,
Good old Sid.
early this year in February, as part of the Seafee gathering in Victoria, organized by the First Nations Fisheries Council, Chef Steph and I were both on a panel reviewing the domestic market opportunities and pathways for Indigenous seafood. So I'm so excited you're here with us, Chef Steph. So looking forward to learn more about you, and I'll kick it off right away with our very first question. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your passions, and your journey into this industry.
Of course. Dringwinzi, my name is Steph Baryluk, and I'm originally from Teetl'it Gwich'in. So I'm from Fort McPherson, Northwest Territories, above the Arctic Circle. So I had a very unique upbringing compared to other people, within Canada and almost within the world. Going out in extreme cold in the winter was something normal to us. I grew up in a Gwich'in community with Gwich'in parents and Gwich'in grandparents. So while I was being raised in the community, I didn't really know what a rich upbringing I had until I actually left my community and got to see what else was out in the world. I grew up with a big family where food was always the center of gathering, of showing respect, of living our life as Gwich'in people.
Lovely. I mean, at the panel, you shared a little bit of that with some photos as well. That was wonderful. And so, how did you make your way into cooking as part of a Red Seal chef? And
So I actually jumped around to different careers. Again, working and growing up in the Northwest Territories, with everything being so small, you kind of have the opportunity to work in so many fields. And doing that, very quickly you realize what you like and what you don't like. And living away from my community, moving to a big city, I really found a disconnection back to who I am, back to my traditional foods as an Indigenous person. And a big part of that reconnection was through food, cooking my own food, cooking recipes that my mom or my grandmother produced while I was growing up. And it was just a healthy way to keep my connection back to the Arctic when living in Edmonton or living in Vancouver. So I went to culinary school here in Vancouver and I never left, kind of stayed here. And now my children are being raised here. Just created a life outside of my community and very fortunate to continue sharing about who we are as Indigenous people, sharing our foods and sharing our way of life. So it's almost full circle for me. I'm just passionate about what I do and that I get to do it.
Amazing. Oh, it's beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing. And, I understand that you've also started a company as well. So thinking about sharing with across the globe, essentially. And I understand you do a lot of traveling as well. But, what would you like our listeners to know about Niha and what you're building?
So, I mean, working in the culinary industry for over 10 years, Indigenous cuisine itself is very underrepresented. There's not a lot of restaurants or catering or Indigenous chefs, and um, I think there should be. I think as, one of the first peoples of this country, it's important to learn, to educate, and to share that knowledge. As you look through the world, there's many Indigenous chefs and cooks doing amazing things, sharing so much knowledge and traditions. And for me, I guess seeing the benefit of that first initial program, the Rooted Indigenous Food Program, and seeing the positive impacts directly from cooking our food was the little light bulb moment to say, let's do this and let's take it all the way.
Yeah, you touched on that Rooted Indigenous Food Program. Could you share a little bit more about that for our listeners who don't know what that was about?
Of course. So in 2023, I was approached by Simon Fraser University about creating uh, an Indigenous food program, something that's not really been done anywhere else. And, I worked directly with the SFU team in creating the Rooted Indigenous Food Program. And it just kind of took off immediately. And my biggest takeaway was just the respect that was given from the SFU staff and working with them directly about putting out this type of information. Before we even launched the program, I had to go to my elders and ask for permission to start sharing about this culture. Everything I know and everything that was taught to me is not mine. It's, it was passed down through generations, and it becomes a lot more powerful than just food being cooked or, recipes being created. I'm sharing about who we are and how we live our lives. And I just acknowledge the SFU staff for working with me so closely, so respectfully, putting out the information just the way they did. And, it's a program that won awards. So the staff and students at SFU Dining Commons can eat Indigenous menu items once a month, where we're serving, 1,500 students for lunch and even more for dinner. So it's a big operation. Since launching the program in 2023, we've also launched a catering program for Rooted up at SFU. And tomorrow I'm actually going in again and launching more new menu items, new recipes for the team. So it's been an amazing journey at SFU, and I'm just excited to see it to continue to grow.
Wow. Can you share what, you mentioned going to your elders and essentially having this approval to share, essentially pass this knowledge. And what does that look like when it comes to translating ingredients and tradition, perhaps cooking methods into college dining? What was that process like?
So it helps that I'm a professionally trained chef. So kind of merging, all of that traditional upbringing, cultural upbringing, and just merging it completely with today's world. So the first initial conversation with the elder in my community was, is it okay to share about Gwich'in people so publicly? Is it okay to share about our knowledge and our traditions? And very quickly I was met with, as Gwich'in people, we share what we know and we share what we have. There came my second question. Can I change our traditional dishes? Can I change moose and caribou and ducks and geese? And again, yes. Traditionally, Indigenous people, we follow very simple values about respecting, sharing, continuing our culture. And it's a way our people kind of lived for years. So now all of a sudden you're working in an institution like SFU where you're not cooking 50 pieces of bannock, you're cooking 1,500 pieces of bannock.
Yeah.
Right? So you're mass producing. I spent years working in oil camps, and I've seen mass producing. So I think just all the little tips along my journey as a chef kind of shaped me to be able to all of a sudden mass produce these things. The biggest challenge was actually sourcing Indigenous ingredients.
Laura, ready to trade podcast mics for policy talk?
Only if it's for the CHFA Regulatory Forum.
Fair. It's where industry leaders, policymakers, and Health Canada executives come together to shape the future of natural, organic, and wellness in Canada.
So basically, if you care about where the industry is headed, you should probably be in that room.
CHFA's Regulatory Forum takes place in Ottawa, May 26th to 27th, and it's open to members and non-members.
Online registration closes May 12, 2026. Get the details at chfa.ca/events.
And now back to munching on molecules. That was actually my part two of the question. Thinking about some of very intentional ingredients in that whole sourcing side of things. So what does sourcing look like when it comes to selecting very intentional ingredients?
So, a lot of my personal traditional foods from the Arctic is all ingredients I can't serve publicly because almost all my ingredients come directly from the land,
Okay.
and there's no certification process for the foods to get into the supply chain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, boom, boom. So now I have this big chance to represent, indigenous foods, but how exactly do I do it
Mm-hmm.
without all these regulations? And um, so I had to look at, first of all, what can I source? And because we're in the food industry, what works for food costing as well?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there's already a number of barriers set up, trying to showcase indigenous foods, being an indigenous chef, and um, it's something that we kind of grew up with as indigenous people is barriers. It's what is there, and it makes us very adaptable. It makes us find ways to continue to do the work. And the way I try to showcase myself and this company is through doing it in a good way. So it's really looking and working and seeing what you can source. So number one was bison, salmon. We're located in BC, so a lot of fish,
Mhm.
seafoods. And then the next part of that is looking at indigenous producers. So which indigenous businesses are producing foods within BC? How do we highlight them? Using things like local bannock mixes, jams, hot sauces, looking at different meats we can source, so bison and elk, and really just making it work. We can make a lot work with what we have, and I think that goes back to my upbringing is use what you have.
Yeah.
You don't have it, make it work without it, and utilizing all of it. So when you're harvesting a moose, for instance, how do you utilize the whole animal and not waste anything? And that's just how we were raised. So,
Really great pillars, to live
Mhm.
by is to use what you have from the land and then you said about respect. I think about when we last met, you were talking about travel. And so I think about how do you, you were at the trade mission for Mexico City. Perhaps you were going to Rome at some point, or maybe off to Rome in a few months. How do you extend that sourcing or sharing the knowledge base when it comes to going to these faraway countries that may not have elk or bison?
so again, it's really looking and learning along the way. You need to be adaptable. You need to be open. If we're in another country and we have, dried spruce tips or
Mm.
sage or items like that, then we start to talk about those products and how are they used. So birch syrup, so getting birch from the birch tree. There's many, as you look throughout the country and you look at different indigenous nations, we all eat differently. We all eat seasonally. And so there's products that we can then utilize in different ways. So the menus that we run through NIHA are very versatile. We're making tostadas and wontons and spring rolls, and so it's very different, but we're still telling the same story of the bison, of the Labrador tea, of whatever item we're using.
Amazing. So you mentioned that adaptability and really kind of adapting for what you have access to, but then that storytelling piece being so consistent, which I think is so powerful. And we saw you your talk at Thrive Conference as well, and sharing some of that was at BC Food Bev last year. I can't believe it's time soaring. It's coming up again at the Thrive Conference, and some of the work that you're doing within local communities and this education piece, and working with students, youth. Can you share a bit more about the type of work that you're doing with it with NIHA and how people can also work with you as well and your team?
Of course. So again, it's working in Rome, Italy, cooking at the Canadian Embassy,
Mhm.
to working in Canada's Arctic in Old Crow, Yukon, flying only community with 400 people. So it's kind of all over the place. And some of the things we offer is actually how to integrate Indigenous foods into public institutions.
Okay.
How do people serve the food? We've been doing a lot of teaching on just the cultural training in non-Indigenous, working with Indigenous peoples, and how to start to begin that relationship building. We've been working with youth in just training as to we did a program with Aurora College up in the Northwest Territories about the culinary, almost like Indigenous culinary. So for students interested in culinary, we did a small Indigenous program on wild foods that they took for 2 weeks.
Oh.
We're looking at programs with many universities, many colleges where, we host events within restaurants, so almost like a restaurant takeover.
Okay.
Oh,
Um,
cool. Yes.
But again, I think, our main goal and our main objective is really how do we get our foods on the table? We're here in Vancouver and there's very minimal places you can get Indigenous foods. Um, and I think that for me, it's about educating, it's about sharing about who we are, it's about showing the youth what they can do, a little inspiration. But also it's a chance for Indigenous people to be seen. When we're serving these foods, numerous times I've had people who are there eating almost in tears because their food is being served. And that's something so small yet so big. The impact is huge. Niha is very new. I think we're 14 months old, and the amount of communities and, countries we've been able to work in, every engagement, there's always one person coming back to me, reaching out to me about what a difference it's made. I think, that we lost a lot of our culture and we lost a lot of who we are. So now with people kind of relearning about that is a good time to just gather around our foods like old times and break some bread, drink some tea, and share about who we are, Indigenous or non-Indigenous.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, not close to tears, but I love what you did when I was in Victoria for that CFI gathering, and you sort of mixed what was new, like now and current, with your Indigenous culture. So I got to try your bannock that you had, but it was a focaccia bannock, and it was just it just made it a little bit more. I understood it a little bit more. Like, I don't know Indigenous food, or bannock is the only product that I am aware of because there's one here in Vancouver. They opened one at the airport. But just to showcase the breadth and variety that you're able to incorporate into the cuisine, and you're working with other Indigenous chefs too at that conference. So it was so great to see. Yeah, I love that.
And when we're cooking, it's almost what we say is food is medicine, and that means that there's a lot of healing going on when we're using these products. A lot of the products we're using were used for medicinal purposes, sweetgrass and cedar and juniper, and so it's good medicine to be sharing our food. Yeah.
Love that. And I think about the work that you're doing. I think about, when we see like models and showing like great examples, do you find that the work that you're doing is inspiring others to come forward and share more about the, tradition, to share more about different pathways? I'm curious about that as well, because I think sometimes first, thinking about that inspiration and you're seeing others in the industry as a great example to strive for as well.
Absolutely. I think, for me, growing up in a community of 800 people, I've had all the supports throughout my life to continue on.
Mhm.
And what I realize is a lot of people don't have that. So if they can see, someone from the same community or someone who grew up the same way, doing and achieving things, then it will only give them that push and nudge to kind of go after what they want to do.
Mhm.
Uh, throughout the country, you see not just Indigenous food being cooked, but you see Indigenous fashion, Indigenous art, and Indigenous music. And I think we start to take over some of these spaces just for an introduction, just to start to teach people, like you mentioned, you're not super familiar with Indigenous foods, and how do we start to change that? How do we start to gather people and share about our food systems? And again, it's very large. For the Northwest Territories, there's 27 different First Nations, so I'm one of them. Each tribe has different stories, different foods, different ways they prepare items. So as I'm on this journey with Niha, I'm also learning. I'm invited into many nations that aren't mine. I am a visitor, on their lands. So we're not looking to extract information. We're looking to support and work with you. And we've been met with just so much gratitude, leaving communities who are just feeling so inspired, working with community members who, just have that little pep in their step now that they see what's possible. Um, and I think for me, the biggest validation was not awards, was not anything like that, but going home to my community and seeing the elders so proud of what's being done. Everybody sees everything online, and even the elders too, regardless if they have a computer or not.
Yeah.
So I know they're watching.
Yes.
And that means that, with each engagement, it needs to be done respectfully and it needs to be done in a good way. And that's our values with Niha is just doing the work and doing the work right.
I love that. Are there any other exciting initiatives that you have for 2026 with Niha or?
Of course. So in next week, I'll be heading home to the Northwest Territories, and I'll be traveling through 4 communities within the Northwest Territories. From there, I'm going to Iceland to
Oh,
no cooking, just speaking. So it's a little different. I think my comfort spot is in the kitchen. And then, we're always looking to grow who we're working with. So if you're, a Indigenous community or someone just interested in learning, please reach out on our website and we'll be sure to be in touch.
amazing.
Awesome. Oh, that's so
Amazing.
good. We have this, I guess, and there sounds like there's a lot of activity. So love to
Yeah.
link in, of course, how people can find you, the best way to connect, whether it's on LinkedIn or through your website. But of course, upcoming events, I think, for people, if it's open to the public or just best ways of working together, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest and questions as well. Thinking about, this is something we love to ask, and it's around, a shout out or a moment of praise essentially to someone who's made an impact on your professional or personal journey. If there's anyone you like to shout out to who's helped you along the way.
Of course, you might know him. He goes by Sid Mita.
Oh, sounds familiar.
I don't know. I don't know.
So I think, without Sid in this, we're both co-founders of Niha. Um, it just complements it so well, and he understands, again, going back to the values. It might not always be the smartest business decision, but it's the way I was brought up as a Gwich'in person, and that's really about doing the work in a good way. And if that means, picking and choosing your work to ensure that the other organization also has, good intentions, then that's what we need to do. We're sharing much more than a plate of food. We're sharing a lot of personal stories and knowledge. So we just need to make sure that people understand that. And so far, it's been busy, a lot of coffee, but just the amount of praise in community from community members is the reason we continue to do this work. And without Sid, it would be a lot harder. So I just appreciate all the work Sid's been doing, and just the amount of people we're reaching. We're very excited to do this work.
Well, that's
Wow.
awesome. Yeah, the partnership piece is having that partnering to work through and to support both sides. I think that's so powerful. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
equally fitting because our next question is a question from a previous guest. And this previous guest was episode 6, Sid Mehta, on our podcast. We
love
did not
Sid.
tell you this was the question, but we figured he doesn't know that you're here when we interviewed him back in episode 6, 3 years ago. So his question is, what is one small action you are working as part of your sustainability or climate change goal? And it could be like, for me, it was making sure that I always bring my water bottle and fill it with water when I travel. And it's just my small action when it comes to climate change.
I think it's something that, again, I was raised with. And when I got into culinary school and I started learning about using the best cuts, the best veggies, the best
Mhm.
fruits, there's so much more, as Indigenous people, we use every aspect. And, fish, for instance, we eat all of the fish and it's almost like delicacies, different parts. So, for me personally, just continuing to live by what I was taught and to actually implement those teachings into my home here in the urban city, and teaching my kids about that as well, because my children are growing up, two little Indigenous children away from their community,
Mhm.
and trying to keep that connection alive through those teachings.
I love it.
Beautiful.
I love a good fish head soup. My
Exactly.
mom
So
makes
many
it. It's
benefits.
so good.
So many nutrients and great fats and amazing. Well, oh, that is wonderful words to live by for sure. So, Chef Steph, this is your moment. What is a question you'd like to leave for our next guest, not knowing who they are?
Of course. I think, in today's society, we lost how we connect so easily. For Indigenous peoples, we always connect easier face to face. Um, and my question is, what dish brings you back home? I think a lot of times I run programming and people find something within our cooking. We do a lot of comfort foods and they say, oh, that's what my aunt made, or that's what my cooker made. So really finding that connection to what brings you back home, and it's gonna start, it's good medicine to think about that.
Absolutely. What is your dish that brings you back home?
Stews all the way.
Stews.
We ate a lot of stews growing up, so nice hearty stew.
I love that.
Same
Oh,
here. Same here.
Awesome. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate you guys inviting me onto your podcast.
Thank you so much
yeah.
for joining us. And yeah, I'm excited to keep the conversation going, and definitely looking forward to sharing the links and resources out with listeners on how to best connect. Um, Chef Steph, it's been such a joy. Thank you for your time. And oh my goodness, it's not enough. We
I know.
always could use more time, but thank you so much.
Masi Cho for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.